Hello and welcome to Project Awareness. My name is Tammy Joya and I am the advocate and presenter. This workshop is about what all parents need to do to make the school district aware of your child with a disability. This is what is called the service delivery page. Every state has a different form for what an IEP looks like, but somewhere in the IEP is a page that looks like this. And what it does is it tells you the exact services that your child is going to get, what that service is going to focus on. It should tell you the type of staff that's going to provide that service, the start and end date of that service, and the frequency and duration of that service. This is where you want to end up. Okay? After everything's been said and done, this is where you need to be. Okay, the way you get to the service delivery page is through the evaluations. Your goal is to make the district aware of your child with a disability. There's two ways that can be done. From 0 to 3, your child could be referred to early intervention due to a doctor's referral or somebody in the state saying that your child needs to go to early intervention to obtain services as your child may have a disability. Now, your child can go to early intervention up to the age of 3. Once your child turns 3, now they're under the jurisdiction of the public school district from 3 to 21. So early intervention, if your child is getting services from them, once your child turns 3 or is about to turn 3, early intervention has to notify the public school system. Once the school system gets notification from early intervention that your child is suspected of having a disability and any and all services that your child may have been receiving at early intervention, the school district now has to do an evaluation on your child. And then they'll send you consent, and all of this you're a part of. You're a part of all of this stuff going on. You know that it's going to happen because early intervention will tell you all of the steps. You have to participate in team meetings. It's a big to do. Okay, so that's one way that the school district finds out your child is a child with a disability. The other way is you tell the school, and you can tell the school you suspect your child is having a disability, whether or not they went to early intervention. As of the age of 3, your child is under the jurisdiction of the public school system. So if you believe your child has a disability and your child is 3, you contact the school district and tell them. And that's called child find. All of this is called child find. The school district is responsible for identifying, locating, and evaluating children that are suspected of having a disability as of the age of 3, all the way up until they're 21. Okay? Your objective is to secure the appropriate services, supports, and or placement for your child. You can only do this through the evaluations. And the school district cannot do evaluations unless consent must be written, and you have to sign it, and you have to date it. So when you notify, if you notify the school district, let's say at the age of 3, that your child, you suspect your child of having a disability, put it in writing and send it to the school and tell them that you want your kid evaluated in all areas of functioning. If there's a specific area, you can put that in there too. But you want to make sure it's not just like OT. You want to make sure that they cover everything. If they're going to do an evaluation, you want them to do everything. OT, PT, speech and language. You want them to do academic. You want them to do daily functioning, especially if they're 3. There's a lot of things that they can do. There are specific tests like the Vineland, and that will tell you, what your child's communication levels are, what they're able to do at the age of 3. Did they meet all of their milestones? Do they need help with gross motor and fine motor skills? I mean, there's lots of things that you can do at the age of 3. So just because your kid is not 5 years old doesn't mean that the school district is not obligated to provide you with the information that I'm telling you. They are obligated as of the date your child turns 3. And they can only do this with your consent. Now, if you write it up and you send it to them and you sign it and you date it, remember this. Anytime you give the school something, I don't care if it's the first time you're dealing with them or not, make a copy of your request. The district is on a timeline. Anytime you make a request for them to do something, they're on a timeline for most things. In this instance, they're definitely on the timeline. Once you give them written consent, date it and sign it, and you give it to them, they got 60 days to get it done. Under the law, they have 60 days. Now, some states do 60 school working days, which means the only days that are counted for the 60 days timeline is days that the school district is actually open. So it doesn't include weekends, it doesn't include holidays, it doesn't include summer vacations. In other states, it's straight 60 days. So it's 60 calendar days. So just check with your state to find out. But they're on a timeline from the day you wrote it up, not from the day that they sent you another form on their form to sign for the same thing you already requested. From the day you signed it and you sent it to them and you hand wrote it and sent it to them, or you sent it via email, whatever way you sent it, as of that day, that's the day they start counting. So if they send you a form for you to fill out, first do two things. First, make sure that what they're saying they're going to assess your child in are the exact same areas that you requested originally in your handwritten or emailed form to them. Make sure it matches. If it doesn't match, add it in. Right on their form, just write it right on there. Sign it, and then date it, backdate it to the original date. And the reason I'm telling you this is, this happened to me before. It's happened to me many times. Parents will handwrite a request for evaluations. The district takes 3 or 4 weeks to respond to the parent. And in their mind, it doesn't start counting until the district sends you the form. Yeah, no, that's not the way it works. And I've gotten a lot of schools for noncompliance of IDEA regulations for those timelines because of that action. When you send it to them, backdate the form, make sure everything matches as to what you really wanted, because they will change it. They will leave a whole bunch of stuff off and say, well, we didn't feel. Just so you know, right off the rip. There's nothing in the federal regulations about the school district's feelings. Yeah, no, there's nothing about feelings. Everything is based on solid evidence, valid and reliable, technically sound instruments. There's nothing in the regulations that talks about the school district's opinions or the school district's feelings. Okay? So, it doesn't matter what they say. Add it into on their form, all the areas that they didn't put on there, sign it, and then backdate it, and then make a copy of your original request and attach it to their form, and write on their form, see attached original request. And keep a copy for your records. Everything you sign that you give to the school or you email, you always keep a copy for your records. And you will hear that from me all the time. Okay? Requests for evaluations to be done, you must identify the areas that you want your kid tested in. Otherwise, you're relying on the school district to get it done. So what you want to say is things like this: cognitive functioning, academic, social skills and behavior, social emotional, and daily functioning levels. And it doesn't matter how old your kid is. If your kid is 3 years old, those areas can be evaluated. There's evaluations for all ages of kids. Now, sometimes, depending on the child's disability, the child may not be able to get tested. Now, just because the school district says that they couldn't test your kid, every time a school district tells you that, first, I just want you to know, if they tested your kid on the WISC-5 and they said they couldn't get a score, okay, the first thing that pops into your head is, just because they didn't get a score doesn't mean I can't take my kid to get an independent and get a score. It's happened to me before. I had a kid who was severely autistic, and all of the areas of functioning, all of these areas right here, there was no conclusive scores on anything by the school. We got independent evaluations done by a reputable hospital. Cost the school district $4,300. Guess what? We got scores on every single area for this kid. So because they can't do it doesn't mean it can't be done. It means they're not trained to that level to get it done, and maybe somebody else can. And usually somebody else can. So don't rely on the fact that the school district can't get a testing score. Now, in the event the school district says we couldn't get a score because of, the kid's disability is so severe, blah, 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 blah. That means that their testing for that particular test is inconclusive. That automatically gives you an independent evaluation at public expense. You have no clear foundation as to what your kid can and cannot do based on a particular test. That's the area you want you want an IEE in. So you just put a check mark and you write IEE request. Okay? That's number one. So all of these areas, these are broad areas of testing. So these are the areas that impact a child in school. Now, as we go on, I'm going to break it down even further. So for cognitive functioning, there'll be a whole bunch of stuff underneath cognitive functioning. Think of it as a report card. Okay? When your child gets a report card, it'll say math. But underneath math, it'll say math concepts, math reasoning, math calculations, math computation. Reading is the same way. Reading would say reading and then reading comprehension, reading fluency, all of that, all these different things. There are subcategories under each one of these things. That's what this is. Okay, so if they try to get smart with you and say, well, what do you mean when you say cognitive functioning? Later on, I'm going to tell you what that means, and then you're going to tell them, I want an IQ test done. There. Okay, that's what I want. Social skills and behavior. If they say, well, what do you mean by that? I want the Vineland done. And you can actually go on a website and you can print it out and show it to them. These are the areas that I want to assess under social skills and behavior. I want an FBA done. There's different things, social emotional. That's a clinical psychological evaluation. Because they'll do a psychoeducational evaluation, and it includes IQ testing and academic. It will not include social, emotional, and behavioral, which a clinical psychological can. Okay? Daily functioning levels. At a specific age, your child should know how to do certain things automatically. Because at that age, that's a milestone. That's what they should be able to do. So you're going to want that done too. Okay? But we can break it down. Actually doing is identifying the type of assessments that you want to be administered. And what you can do is, if you still don't understand, like, you tell the school district, well, these are the areas I want my child assessed in, and they'll tell you, like, you say, well, what tests are you going to use? Now, sometimes they don't want to tell you, and you tell them, oh, no, you have to tell me. I want to know what tests each person is going to use on my kid. And you can say, well, I want to meet with the evaluators to discuss the type of assessments being proposed and what the assessments would reveal, or at the very least what its purposes are. Okay? Intelligence testing, neuropsychological assessments, developmental disability testing. For each one of these things, there's a different level of credentialing or a different area for a particular evaluator. So developmental disabilities testings is usually for younger kids or kids that have a very low cognitive ability. Neuropsychologists, 9 times out of 10, the ones I know are all PhDs in their field. And a school psychologist can do pretty much any of the psychological testing, like psychological, the WISC family of testing, academic, psychological, behavioral. They can do everything except like OT, PT, and speech and language and specific functioning skills. They can do all of the rest. All right. Tests of cognitive ability includes vocabulary, spatial relationships, memory, quantitative concepts, concept formation. I just want you to know this is just an example of the areas that could be evaluated. There's many, many more. Test of achievement includes spelling, reading, capitalization, punctuation, knowledge of science, humanities, and social studies. These are all areas that your kid needs to know. Now, within each one of these areas, you can break it down even further. Under reading, it could be reading, reading fluency, reading comprehension. It could be a lot of things. So under each one of these categories, there are more categories. Okay? Communication. It's not just speech and language. Communication encompasses all of this and then some. It could encompass an assistive technology evaluation, because if your kid is nonverbal, then your kid can communicate using technology like computers and tablets and, all different kinds of technology that's available right now. So you're going to need an AT eval that has to do with communication. Oral, written, augmentative, verbal, written, expressive, gestures, receptive. Speech and language pathologist and an AT evaluator, these are listed. This list is not all inclusive. Okay? There are many areas under communication. It depends on your kid. It depends on a lot of different things. So when you say you want a communication eval, if I was you, I'd name all of these areas because this pretty much covers everything. Everything. And they'll say, why? You tell them, my kid can't write. My kid has fine motor skills issues. My kid is nonverbal. My kid is autistic, and my kid has a problem with receptive and expressive language. My kid doesn't even know how to communicate. That's why we need to find out if your kid, maybe your kid only uses language gestures and not verbal. And if he does use gestures, maybe your kid could benefit from an American Sign, can benefit from American Sign Language as part of his education. These are the areas you can ask for evaluations, and when you say communication, when the school district says they're going to do an evaluation under communication, you say specifically what areas. List them. Communication is huge, as you can see. It's huge. Okay, remember I told you I was going to break down the categories. That's what I've been doing. Okay, so behavior is another big category, and it's under social skills, which is one of the very first ones that I talked about if you go back. So if you're going to need a functional behavioral assessment. If your child is autistic, if your child is exhibiting any type of inappropriate behaviors, constantly getting suspended or getting detentions and getting reprimanded by the teacher and timeouts and all of that, you're going to request an FBA, a functional behavioral assessment. Now, the school will do it. 9 times out of 10, the schools do not have board certified behavior analysts on staff. In Massachusetts, I'm finding that there's a lot of BCBAs on staff in public schools. They actually hire them now. But in a lot of states, not only are they not in the school, it's hard to find them across the United States. And so what they'll do is they'll have the school psychologist, the guidance counselor, the adjustment counselor, the school social worker. They'll do the functional behavioral assessment. Now, when you do a functional behavioral assessment, you got to do it in a things because the behavior you may see in a classroom could be totally different from what you see in the lunchroom or at recess. One is very structured and the other one not so much. So you're going to see different behaviors, which is why you need your child to be evaluated in various settings and to be observed. And that's the part that's really huge with a functional behavioral assessment is the observation and the data collection. Okay, so they have to do it over a series of days. They have to do it in various settings, and they have to collect data. So when you get the report, it'll say that they observed the student in this setting, and they describe the setting, and then they say the number of days that they observed them, and they'll do that like for 3 or 4 paragraphs in the functional behavioral assessment. Then they'll show you the days that they collected the data. It'll say things like they identified the target behaviors. So your kid is exhibiting inappropriate behaviors with staff and peers. So they'll identify what your kid has actually done that they're stating is inappropriate behaviors, okay? Maladaptive behaviors like fighting and hitting and pushing and tripping people and talking back and out of turn, and those are maladaptive behaviors. So they'll say all of these dates that they witnessed what your kid was doing in the classroom, in the lunchroom, at recess, on the bus, in the home, on a field trip, in the community. Those are all the areas they have to collect this data in order to get a good picture of what your kid is doing. Now, in most schools, they'll just do the classroom. Well, that's not very helpful. Okay, because like I said, your child exhibits different behaviors in different settings. That's just the nature of the beast. Your kid would act different at my house than he does at home. Everybody knows that. Anybody that's a parent knows that. That's what kids do. And my saying was I would prefer my child to act really nice and behave at somebody else's house, even though he was giving me a hard time at mine. Because that means he's getting what I'm telling him. And he has leeway with me. I'm his mom. So that's why you have to do it across all settings. That's why you have to collect a lot of data. That's why you have to use things like the Vineland, which is a test that covers all of those areas: social skills, adaptive behaviors, maladaptive behaviors, daily functioning. It covers those 4 areas. It covers communication. Okay, so you're going to want the Vineland done or something similar to the Vineland. Okay, for maladaptive and adaptive behaviors, you're going to want to do the BASC, which is a behavior rating scale, and the Conners, which is also behavior rating scales. Behavior rating scales are checklists that are approved and widely accepted by the educational field and people who are in, they're behaviorists and that field of practice. And they're checklists. And they give one to the school, there's one for the teacher, there's one for the parent, and in some cases, depending on the age of the kid, there's one for the kid. So when you collect all of this data for all of these tests and all of the observations, you create this report, and you can actually identify the behaviors that are being observed. Now, one school that I went to was a page and a half. That's ridiculous. There was a lot of things wrong with it. It was a hot mess. They only identified right off the rip. They decided before they even did any evaluations, before they did anything, any observations, they decided they were only going to look at two behaviors, and they were only going to look at it in the classroom. So they limited the scope immediately. But before they even started, they limited the scope. You can't do that. That's by far inconclusive, and it's just wrong on so many levels. You immediately, if you got a report like that, it's a functional behavioral assessment, and you get a report like that, it's a page and a half, and your kid has like autism, and your kid's getting suspended every 5 minutes, and it doesn't matter where your kid's at in the school. He's getting in trouble at lunch, at recess, in the classroom with his one-to-one aid. I mean, he's constantly in trouble, and they only evaluate it in one setting. Yeah, based on all of that, you can get an independent evaluation done by a board-certified behaviorist. Okay? These are the things you need to know because they know you don't know. They know you don't know. So you need to tell them, no, I want you to identify all of the target behaviors, not two. If I needed two, then I wouldn't have a problem. You're going to do two next week? You're going to keep doing them? I mean, how often are you going to do this? My kid has more than one target behavior. I mean, look at this mess. And you show them all the records and you say, look at this. But it's okay. Let them do the evaluation. If they refuse, just say, okay. Let them do it. And then when they get all done, you tell them you want an independent evaluation because of all the things they didn't include. And then you'll be able to list them right down. And if you have a problem, contact me. You can contact me on Facebook at You Can't Teach Them If You Can't Reach Them, or at SPED Q&A chat. You can reach me, or at spedissues@yahoo.com, or on my website, spedanswers.com. You can also reach me, and I'll tell you exactly what to do. Okay? Now, there's a lot of domains in behavior, just like in the other categories. Under each one of the categories, there are more categories. So we just discussed the other social skills and all of that. This slide says, like, for instance, behavior domains would be independent functioning, physical development, economic activity, language development, numbers and time, domestic activities, socialization, personality, and behavior disorders. Those are all areas under behaviors. And this is just an example of the areas that could be evaluated under behavior. It can become a part of the big evaluation, the FBA, the Functional Behavioral Assessment, the behavior analysis, and the corresponding behavior intervention plan that must be developed if your child is exhibiting behaviors that are inappropriate and you want to stop them, decrease them, eliminate them, whatever, replace them with better behaviors or more appropriate behaviors. This is what you want all of these areas addressed. Okay? It depends on the kid. It really does depend on the kid and what you're trying to eliminate as an inappropriate behavior. Parent awareness. What you also want to do is get a formal diagnosis from a doctor. It could be your pediatrician, it could be your psychiatrist, it could be, somebody with a license to practice medicine, whether it's psychiatry or, a general practitioner, somebody in the field that has actually been deemed licensed to practice in a particular field that can actually make a diagnosis. And that's what you want the doctor to do, make a diagnosis. Okay? When you get that diagnosis, you give a copy to the school district. Soon as they get a copy, of the formal diagnosis, they have knowledge. And if they have knowledge, they are obligated under the federal requirements to do everything they're supposed to do for your child to determine whether or not your child is eligible for special education services, which means the district has to provide you with consent to evaluate. And once the district knows they have formal diagnosis, all bets are off. They don't have to wait for you to request testing. It's their job. It's called child find. Once you give them that formal diagnosis from a doctor, they have to implement what's called child find. So the child has already been identified. The school district is now aware of it. The child has already been located. The school district is aware of it. The last part of child find is evaluate. The only way they can evaluate is to provide you with consent first. And you have to consent to all of the evaluations. And like I said earlier, it can be done two ways. You can put it in writing, or you can wait for them to do it. Now, if you do it, it's much better, because now that you have a diagnosis, you know what your child has. It has a name. And because it has a name, guess what else it has? It has a definition about how this disability impacts your child's daily living. How it would impact his cognitive thinking. So now you know exactly the areas that your child needs to be evaluated in. So don't wait for the school district to send you consent after they get this letter from you saying this is your child's diagnosis, whether it's ADHD, whether it's bipolar, whether it's dyslexia, whether it's autism, whether it's cerebral palsy. It doesn't matter. Once the district has that in their hands, they have to evaluate. There are issues going on with this kid. They have to implement child find. So you write it up and you tell them, you sign it, you date it, you give them a copy of it. You tell them, I want my kid evaluated in these areas. And you list all of the areas that you've researched and found from the doctor, from the internet, from wherever you want to look. These are the areas that impact my child. These are the areas I want it done. Now, the district can send you, like I told you before, their own form for you to sign. Be very careful when you get that form, like I told you before. Make sure that your request for the areas you want your kid evaluated in and the school district's form that they sent you after you made that request, make sure they match. Make sure the areas are matching. If they don't match, if they don't include all of the areas that you listed in your original letter, handwrite it on their form, like I told you before. You want to make sure that, because when they send you, the reason why they're sending you that extra form is because they're hoping that you think that because they sent you the form weeks later on their form, their recommended forms for the school district, that you're going to forget and you're going to put a new date on their letter. Because if you sign that letter again with a different date, the earliest date, the newest date rather, the date you sign their form is kickoff. That's when the 60 days starts ticking. So what you do is, if they send you their own form, you backdate it to the original date that you requested it on your handwritten letter or your emailed letter. You print it off or you copy it and you attach it to their letter, backdate it, and you send them that form and you write, see attached, right on the form, their form. They only have 60 days. It's a tactic because there's nothing in the law that says it has to be on their form. Nothing. Nothing. There's nothing in state law that says it has to be on their form either. Because a parent can make a request. The district has two choices. Approve it or refuse it. It's just that simple. There's no third option, none of that crap. There's none of that. Okay? There's no third options. There's no special thing just for a school district. There's no policies and procedures just for your specific school district. No, 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 and no. They have to comply with the regulations. They don't get to make regulations and policies and procedures and practices that are more restrictive than the federal requirement. The federal requirement does not state that the parent can't put it in writing and then the parent has to wait until the district gets around to sending her their form after they changed everything to make it make sense for them. That's not what the regs say. Backdate their form And if you really want to get cool about it, what you do is on the top left-hand corner or somewhere on that form, you say, received from school district on this date. I actually did that to a school district. They know what to do with me. They actually told the parent that she couldn't do that. And she said, really? I just did. Here you go. So she backdated their form and she put in on their form, she put the date that she received their form, which was, I kid you not, like 6 weeks difference. Yeah, that's why they send you their form. That's why you have to, and the mother had to add more stuff on their form. And they did it because it was the end of the school year and they didn't want to stop counting, because in Massachusetts they have 60 days, but they're school working days. So if you give the school district, let's say you give the school district a request to evaluate 2 weeks before school lets out, so that's 10 days. Now they have the remaining time come September. They just pick up where they left off come September. So that's how they do it. So they just wanted to start 60 days in September. And there's actually no law that says a school district in any state cannot evaluate during the summer. I've actually had that overturned in Massachusetts, that I have had students evaluated in the summer because the school district screwed up. So when you get the testing done and you get the consent and everything, the next step will be a meeting to determine eligibility, to discuss the evaluation results, and then to get a determination of eligibility. That's your goal. It can turn out one of two ways. No special needs or special needs. If it's special needs, you either can you get an IEP. So the team now has to develop an IEP. You are a part of that team. They cannot develop an IEP without the parent meaningfully participating in the meeting. Okay? That doesn't mean you sit there, shut up, and don't touch nothing. That means you make comments, that you request certain things. And every time you request something and they tell you no, they're not doing it, they're going to have to put that in writing. Every time they tell you no about a service, frequency or duration of a service, and it's based on the evaluations, and they tell you no, they have to put it in writing and they have to tell you why they're telling you no. They cannot stop you. Now, there's plenty of schools that will try. There's plenty of them. They will develop an IEP without you. And that's a violation of parent participation. That's a violation of your rights. You are the decision-making authority of that team. Believe it or not, you are the head honcho in charge. You accept and or reject. You veto. You can veto what they're saying. If they write up an IEP, you don't like it, you can veto it. Reject it. The only people that can do that is you. The school district can't reject their own IEP. You have the power and authority, not them. They write up an IEP you don't like, you can reject it. You can reject the whole thing. You can reject it partially. You can reject a goal. You can reject a service. You can reject the fact that they didn't provide you with a goal or a service. You can reject it any kind of way you want. Okay? But you are the head honcho in charge. Now, don't go there all cocky and, meet them halfway. But don't give away the farm either. That's why you need to have your evaluations 48 hours before the team meeting so you can go over them, highlight, and make questions and all kinds of stuff. Make sure when they ask you for consent to evaluate that you tell them on that consent that you want any and all evaluations 48 hours before the team, and it's not to be a draft evaluation. You want the full evaluation 48 hours before the team. There's no such thing, by the way, of a draft IEP. A draft evaluations. There's no such thing. It's either an evaluation or it's not. It's like being a little bit pregnant. There's no such thing. Now, you can get a draft IEP, but you can't get draft evaluations. There's no such thing. Just so we're clear. You get the IEP developed, you participate in that IEP meeting. You fully participate. You make sure you participate. You don't sign that IEP until you brought it home, you looked it over, you made sure that you're doing the right thing. And at any given time after that meeting, you can call another team meeting if you don't think it's working. You can call a team meeting anytime you want. That's another thing. Some school districts will tell parents you can only have one meeting or two meetings a year. You can have a meeting every month if you want to call a meeting every month. There's no timeline on how many meetings a parent can call. Okay? Make sure you're a full participant. This is very, very important. Okay? The school district awareness. Informing the school district. Now the district is aware of your child with a disability. The school district's responsibility. Now the district has been put on notice and IDEA has been triggered. IDEA are the federal requirements. Everything, step-by-step instructions as to what they're supposed to do regarding your child. When they deviate from step-by-step clearly established rules and regulations, that's called noncompliance. Okay? And FAPE. Now FAPE comes into play. Free Appropriate Public Education. We're developing an IEP to provide your child with FAPE because based on all of the evaluations and the team, everybody determined your child needs special education, which means he needs an IEP, which means he needs goals and objectives, he needs services and supports. That's what your child needs to access the general curriculum in a public school. All of those services in that IEP. The district must ensure that FAPE is provided to your child at all times, 100%, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It has to be provided. Otherwise, they're in noncompliance of the IEP and your child's rights. And that could equate to training for the district if they're found to be in noncompliance. Compensatory services could be owed for all of the time your child didn't get a particular service that was already stated he was going to get in his IEP. A lot of things could happen that's not good for a school district if they don't provide FAPE. So, you have arrived. This is what it could look like on your child's IEP. Services and supports. It's somewhere in your kid's IEP. You're going to have a page and it's going to show you where all of your kids' services are. It may not look like this particular page. I like Massachusetts IEPs. They're very easy to read. Well, for the most part. I like the page. My favorite page is the service delivery page and the placement page of an IEP in Massachusetts because it's very clear cut. You could see it immediately. You know where it is. Some other IEPs, the information is mixed in the middle of the IEP somewhere, where the goals and objectives are. Right underneath that, it'll say the type of service your kid's going to get. So it's a little difficult sometimes, but all you have to do is say, where's the OT services my kid's going to get? Where is it in this IEP? Especially if you're brand new, you've never seen one of these documents before. They're very confusing. But to help you out, before you do a team meeting, what you could do is go onto your state's Department of Education website. They all have a special education page. And on their pages, most if not all, have a page for the IEP forms, blank forms. Okay? You can go on there and download a blank form to familiarize yourself with how the team meeting is going to go to develop an IEP in the event that actually happens, and it's determined your child needs an IEP. So you're preparing yourself ahead of time, and it's going to go page by page. The way they present it to you, the way you can download it in your computer is usually it's page by page, just like that. And they can add pages. Just because they only have space for 2 goals and objectives doesn't mean they can't add more. I've had IEPs my kids had 10 goals. They had to add more pages. And that's what you do. You just add more pages. Just because there's only space for 1 goal and objective doesn't mean that's all your kid gets. It just means they're going to go add some more pages. So we can put more space in there for goal 2, 3, and up to 10 or 15. It doesn't matter. As you can see, this kid right here had 6 goals in his IEP. But when you download the form, there's only room for the blank form, only has space for goals 1 and 2. They just had to add them. More space, more pages. It's really easy. Okay? But once you get here, you have proven and confirmed to yourself and to the school district that you have raised the awareness of the fact that in your child's school district, your child has a disability. And these are the services that your child needs in order to access the general curriculum. In order for your child to receive faith, this is what your child needs in place. In order for your child to get an education. When you get here, you know you did good. But here's the thing. Sometimes your kid needs more than what's written here. Now, for this kid, he needed more stuff. As the years go on, your kid needs more stuff. Or your kid could use less. But just because the district proposed it and they got to this point doesn't mean that that's the end. If they said, well, you wanted OT, but the school district said your child didn't need it, you can argue that point. There's ways around it. So if you really believe your kid needs more services than what's listed here, there's ways of getting it. But you got this far, and that's a good thing. If you only have one, that's still a good thing because you've accomplished one fact, that your child was deemed eligible for an IEP based on even if it's one thing that's listed here. Okay, and the accommodations. Now you know. The cool thing about getting this far is you've established that your child needs an IEP. In the event the school district tries to take away your child's IEP, you reject their findings, and the last IEP or the last placement of your child, that the last accepted IEP is the one that's still in place. So let's say next year comes and they take out half of the services that are listed on this IEP. You reject that IEP, the new one that took out half of the services. And that means this IEP is still in place. Okay? The last accepted IEP is in place until the issues in the new IEP are resolved. Now, it may be that it's never resolved and your kid will still be on that IEP. Okay? Just remember, there's ways of getting around the system. The school district doesn't hold all the cards. They don't. They want you to think they do, but they don't. I want to thank you. I hope I didn't scare you with the clapping. I want to thank you for joining me today. This is all about raising awareness. It's all about your student, your child's rights to FAPE, a free appropriate public education. It's all about your rights as a parent because you're all over IDEA too. Parent participation in the development of the IEP. The parent has to consent to evaluations. You're all over IDEA. Make no mistake. And the school district's responsibilities. IDEA is designed for the school district to follow and implement. And your job is to make sure they do it. Their job is to implement. Your job is to enforce the implementation of IDEA. That's the way it works. That's the district's responsibility, is to implement. And just remember, be fearless. Sun Tzu said, I would rather have people fear me than respect me. And it's true. It's true. They're not your friends. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to be nasty. But the people that work at the school are not your friends. Okay? They work for you. They are state agents. They work for a public agency. Everything they get comes from your tax dollars. You be cordial. You be nice. You be respectful. As much as you're getting respect, you give respect. You have rights. Demand the rights. Demand respect. You don't give respect if you're not getting it. Be fearless. I want to thank you for joining me today. Have a great day. The information contained in this document is not all inclusive. There's lots of stuff you can do. It's an attempt to demonstrate the resources that you have available that you may not know about. And guess what? It's a don't ask, don't tell situation with the public school system. I'm telling you, even with the state level. Don't ask, don't tell. You don't ask, they're not telling. Believe it. Again, my name is Tammy Joya, and you can catch me at spedanswers.com. I provide representation, training, education, and empowerment. And through this, we can raise awareness. Thank you again. Have a great day.